It was supposed to be a short solo trip, a moment of freedom, exploration, and escape from routine. Elisa Lam, a 21-year-old university student from Vancouver, checked into a budget hotel in downtown Los Angeles on January 28, 2013. She was traveling alone, updating her blog, sharing thoughts about books, mental health, and the strangers she met along the way. To anyone who read her posts, she was a bright, thoughtful young woman seeking her place in the world. But just a few days later, Elisa vanished. No goodbye, no trace, nothing. Weeks passed with no leads. Then a single video changed everything. Surveillance footage from the hotel elevator showed Elisa inside, alone, behaving in a way that was chillingly unnatural. She pressed multiple buttons, peered out into the hallway nervously, stepped in and out, waved her arms strangely, and appeared to be speaking to someone, or something, that wasn't there. The footage quickly went viral. Millions watched. Millions speculated. Some said she was hiding. Others believed she was hallucinating. And many were convinced this was something darker. Something supernatural. 18 days after she disappeared, hotel guests began complaining about low water pressure and a strange taste in the tap water. Maintenance workers climbed to the rooftop and opened one of the water tanks. Inside, floating face down and naked, was the decomposing body of Elisa Lam. How did she end up there? Why was the lid closed from the outside? Why was she alone on the roof, a place supposedly locked to all guests? This is not just a story of a young woman gone too soon. It's a puzzle of contradictions, mental health, internet theories, and a building that holds more secrets than answers. This is the case of Elisa Lam.
Elisa Lam was born on April 30th, 1991, in Vancouver, Canada, to immigrant parents from Hong Kong. She was the youngest daughter in a traditional Chinese family, raised in the quiet suburbs far from the chaos that would eventually swallow her name. By most accounts, Elisa was a curious, intelligent, and thoughtful young woman. She loved fashion, books, indie music, and pouring her thoughts onto her blog, a digital journal that she kept under the handle Etherfields. But behind her poetic reflections and artistic taste, there was something heavier that followed her. Elisa had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and depression, a struggle she never tried to hide. She wrote candidly about her ups and downs, her medications, her thoughts on therapy, and the feeling of being stuck in a black wave. Her posts were not cries for help, but windows into a mind constantly trying to balance itself between light and shadow. Elisa was also searching for meaning, for herself, for a break from the cycle of school, pressure, and the weight of mental illness. In late January 2013, she decided to travel alone to California, a solo trip along the west coast of the United States. It was meant to be a break, an adventure, a form of self-discovery. Her parents were hesitant, but Elisa promised to call them every day to check in. Her first few stops were typical: San Diego, the zoo, bookstores, cafes. She took photos, updated her blog, and posted to social media like any other traveler. But her words carried something fragile, a kind of emotional transparency that now, in hindsight, feels almost like foreshadowing. In one post she wrote, "You're always haunted by the idea that you're wasting your life." When she arrived in Los Angeles, she checked into the Cecil Hotel, a place steeped in history, infamous for crime, death, and darkness. Whether Elisa knew its reputation or not remains unclear. What is clear is that she was alone, in a city she didn't know, inside a building that held stories eerily similar to the one she was about to become.
Elisa checked in to the Cecil Hotel on January 28, 2013.
At first, she was assigned a shared room, a dorm-style setup with other young female travelers. But just a couple of days later, she was moved to a private room after complaints from her roommates. The reasons were vague, but those who encountered her described her behavior as odd or disturbing. One said she had long conversations with no one there. Another said she would disappear for hours and return laughing to herself. It was unclear whether these were symptoms of a manic episode or simply misunderstood behavior by strangers. But the shift from shared to solo was the first subtle sign that something was unraveling. Despite this, Elisa continued to explore Los Angeles. She visited local bookstores, including the Last Bookstore, a famous downtown spot. The staff remembered her as talkative, bright, and cheerful. One employee even said she was buying gifts for her family back home. Nothing about her demeanor raised concern. To them, she was just another tourist, polite, curious, full of youthful energy. But at the same time, her online presence began to quiet down. No new blog posts, no fresh updates on Tumblr, no more daily check-ins with her parents. On January 31st, she missed a scheduled call home. Her family, instantly worried, contacted the LAPD and reported her missing. Within hours, police arrived at the Cecil to search her room. They found her belongings, wallet, ID, laptop, all still inside. Her bed was unmade, clothes were scattered, but there was no sign of a struggle. No blood, no forced entry, just absence. Guests and hotel staff were questioned. Some had seen her days earlier in the lobby. Others thought they saw her exiting the elevator. But no one could say for sure what happened next. There were no security alerts, no alarms triggered. Elisa had simply vanished inside a 15-story building in the middle of one of the busiest cities in the world. It was as if she had dissolved into the walls. On February 14, 2013, 2 weeks after Elisa Lam was reported missing, the Los Angeles Police Department made a public move that would turn the case into an internet phenomenon. They released a 4-minute surveillance video from one of the Cecil Hotel's elevators, taken on the night of January 31, the last known footage of Elisa alive. The video was unsettling. At first, Elisa steps into the elevator and presses multiple floor buttons in quick succession. She waits, but the doors don't close. She peeks out into the hallway, steps back in, then suddenly hides in the corner as if avoiding someone. She jumps out again, waves her hands in strange, almost fluid motions, then steps back into the elevator, pressing more buttons. At one point, she appears to be speaking to someone invisible in the hallway. Her gestures are erratic, her expressions shifting between fear and something harder to name. The footage went viral almost instantly. Within days, millions had watched it on YouTube, dissecting every frame. Some viewers slowed the video down, claiming to see a shadowy figure just outside the door. Others believed she was hiding from a pursuer, possibly a hotel guest or an intruder. And then there were those who went further, suggesting something supernatural was at play, citing the hotel's dark history of suicides, murders, and alleged hauntings. While the internet spiraled into theories, the LAPD continued their physical search of the building. They swept every floor, every accessible room, the basement, and even parts of the roof, but reported finding no trace of Elisa. Officially, they stated the rooftop water tanks were locked and alarmed, and no one could access them without triggering a security alert. Unofficially, this claim would later be questioned. What began as a missing person investigation had now morphed into something much bigger, a global obsession, fed by a 4-minute clip of a young woman acting in ways no one could explain. On the morning of February 19, 2013, maintenance worker Santiago Lopez followed up on persistent guest complaints. Low water pressure, dark-colored tap water, and a strange taste that had lasted for days. Climbing the hotel's fire escape to the roof, Lopez walked across to the water tanks. He noticed one of the 4 cylindrical tanks had its hatch partially ajar. When he pushed it open, the sight inside froze him in place. A young woman's body, naked and bloated from weeks in the water, drifting just beneath the surface. The rooftop was immediately sealed off as police and the coroner were called. Removing the body proved challenging. The opening of the tank measured less than 2 feet across, and there was no internal ladder. Emergency crews had to drain the water and cut into the side of the tank to bring her out. Identification was swift. The coroner confirmed the remains belonged to Elisa Lam, missing for 19 days. No clothing was found on her body. Her clothes were later recovered from the tank, saturated and floating separately. News of the discovery swept through international media within hours. Images of the hotel rooftop and the water tanks appeared on front pages, often side by side with still frames from the elevator video. For the guests staying at the Cecil, the revelation was even more personal. Many had bathed in, brushed their teeth with, and even drunk from the very water that had, unknowingly, been tainted by Elisa's remains for weeks. It was a detail that turned a mystery into something far more disturbing, intimate, inescapable, and unforgettable. The Los Angeles County Coroner's Office conducted an autopsy on Elisa Lam's body on February 21, 2013. Initially, the report was marked as inconclusive, with toxicology results pending. When the final report was released in June 2013, it concluded that Elisa's death was an accidental drowning, with her bipolar disorder listed as a significant contributing factor. No alcohol or illegal drugs were found in her system, but traces of her prescribed medications used to treat bipolar disorder were present. The level suggested she may not have been taking them as consistently as prescribed. The LAPD maintained that Elisa had somehow gained access to the roof and entered the tank on her own. They pointed to the lack of signs of struggle or trauma and the absence of evidence indicating foul play. However, critics noted several unanswered questions. How did she bypass the locked rooftop door without triggering the alarm? Could she have lifted the heavy hatch alone? And why were her clothes found separately in the water? Images from the rooftop inspection showed the water tanks towering over the narrow roof surface, with only a maintenance ladder leading up to each. Public reaction to the verdict was divided. Some accepted the conclusion of accidental drowning triggered by a mental health crisis. Others believed the investigation left too many gaps, fueling theories of homicide, paranormal influence, or even elaborate cover-ups. The case had now crossed from a police file into the realm of urban legend, a mystery that official documents couldn't put to rest.
Mental health experts who reviewed the case noted that Elisa Lam's bipolar disorder could have played a significant role in her final hours. In particular, manic episodes, marked by heightened energy, disorganized thinking, and impaired judgment, can sometimes lead individuals to take dangerous risks without recognizing the consequences. Toxicology reports showed that Elisa had lower than prescribed levels of her medication, suggesting she might have missed some doses in the days before her disappearance. For someone with bipolar disorder, even a short lapse in medication can destabilize mood and thought processes, potentially contributing to erratic or unsafe behavior. But the Cecil Hotel itself was more than just a backdrop. It was an environment steeped in an unsettling history. Since its opening in 1927, the building had been linked to suicides, murders, and infamous residents, including serial killer Richard Ramirez. Its location on the edge of Los Angeles' Skid Row placed it amid poverty, drug use, and crime. Psychologists have long studied how high-stress environments can exacerbate mental health struggles, and for a solo traveler already vulnerable, the Cecil could have amplified feelings of paranoia or fear. Then there was the role of the internet. When the LAPD released the elevator video, online communities exploded with speculation. Forums like Web Sleuths, YouTube channels, and even fringe conspiracy sites dissected every movement Elisa made. The lack of clear answers allowed the story to take on its own life, blending fact, theory, and sometimes pure invention. In this way, the Elisa Lam case became a cultural phenomenon, not because of what was definitively known, but because of what could never be proven. It was a mirror reflecting both the fragility of mental health and the human appetite for mystery, magnified by a digital world eager to fill in the blank.
More than a decade after Elisa Lam's death, her story still lingers, not just in police files, but in documentaries, podcasts, online forums, and the minds of those who watched her final moments in the elevator. The case has become a cautionary tale about the dangers of traveling alone, the unpredictable nature of mental illness, and the murky line between curiosity and exploitation. The Cecil Hotel closed in 2017 for renovations, but reopened under a new name, Stay on Main, in an attempt to distance itself from its dark past. Still, for many, the building remains synonymous with the unsolved mysteries it has witnessed. Several questions continue to haunt both investigators and the public. How did Elisa access the locked rooftop without triggering alarms? Could she have lifted the heavy tank hatch on her own? Why were her clothes removed and found separately in the water? And most troubling, was anyone else involved? Or was this truly a solitary act driven by mental illness? None of these questions have received answers that satisfy everyone. Beyond the case itself, Elisa's story sparked conversations about how the internet consumes tragedy. Armchair detectives around the world dissected her life, often crossing ethical lines, blurring the boundary between investigation and intrusion. Yet, in another light, this same attention ensured her disappearance and death would not fade quietly into obscurity. Today, the name Elisa Lam exists at the intersection of true crime, urban legend, and internet folklore, a modern mystery where the facts are known, but the truth may never be.